people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgardner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. Teofimo Lopez Jr. wants Jaron Ennis at 147 and Terrence Crawford at 154, and more support from Top Rank and ESPN.
More support like what? Like how?
Teofimo Lopez Jr. is calling his shots and taking some too. The WBO junior welterweight champion Lopez recently rejected a September 27th fight date at the Madison Square Garden Theater in New York on ESPN, a matchup against the recently elevated WBO welterweight champion Brian Norman Jr. was on the table, but Lopez believes there are bigger fish to fry, and he is now focused on reeling in Terrence Crawford, among others, following Bud's close unanimous decision win against Israel Madrimov for the WBA junior middleweight title.
Spare me. You're just bringing up big names, more familiar fighters, more familiar names to distract people from the fact that you just swerved Brian Norman.
You bring up Jaron Ennis at 147, who's with Matchroom. You bring up Terrence Crawford at 154, who's with Turkey.
So that when the journos get to writing stories about you, that will be the headline. Teofimo calls out Ennis. Teofimo calls out Crawford.
After rejecting a Brian Norman fight. Now that we have Riyadh season in the mix, why can't we make a Crawford and Teofimo fight happen? We're in the house now. Make it happen. Lopez told Boxing Scene, more money doesn't cause more problems. More money causes more boxing. Absolutely, I can move up to 154, and I will. Just send me a date. I'm walking at 155 right now. I can fight Crawford right now. I didn't expect for age to catch up with Crawford so quickly against Madrimov. I thought it wouldn't happen until age 38 and not 36.
Is that what happened?
I wouldn't go that far. Going into the Israel Madrimov fight, Terrence Crawford hadn't fought in over a year. So here you have a fighter who's moving up in weight in his mid-30s that hasn't seen action in over a year. It's just as likely that what we saw was ring rust.
Of course, you have to factor Father Time catching up, because one way or another, he always catches up.
Teofimo said everyone had high expectations of Crawford. He even had high expectations against Madrimov. But this is boxing and things happen like this. This is probably good learning for him. He couldn't figure out his moves and feints. Maybe he shouldn't have taken so long coming back.
What took him so long?
Well, after the fight with Errol Spence Jr., Errol activated his rematch clause, and Terrence Crawford was bound to it for what remained of last year. He wasn't at liberty to fight anybody else.
Did everybody all of a sudden forget?
Errol and the PBC didn't decide to abandon the rematch until earlier this year. Did everybody all of a sudden forget? That's what took him so long to come back. He was all tied up with Errol.
Teofimo continued, but to each his own. I wasn't Terrence Crawford in that fight. I'm Teofimo, and I look forward to facing him in the coming year. Lopez has previously hinted that he'd entertain a Crawford fight at a catchweight and that he'd destroy and end the Nebraskan's career if they ever met.
I remember that he said that. At first he said he'd want to fight Crawford at a catchweight. Now he's saying that he'll fight him at a full 154. Crawford is clapped back by calling Lopez a chump, telling him, your little bitch ass better worry about them little guys that's on your ass down there in your own weight class. Lopez leaping up to 154 would require him to bypass the welterweight division. But Lopez is open to facing the welterweight division's top dog too, IBF champion Jaron Ennis, in addition to Brian Norman. To be honest, whatever plans they have, I have nothing but respect for Boots, said Lopez. We've known each other a long time. We won the National Golden Gloves together in 2015. We were both 17 years old. If people want to see it, then we'll do it. I don't say no to any fight.
You literally just said no to a Brian Norman fight.
As long as it's eye-catching and eye-candy to everyone who's watching, that's what really matters. Lopez said he passed on his September fight date because he wanted to fight in Southern California and not because the date fell on a Friday, as some reports have suggested. I didn't duck or dodge Brian Norman at all, said Lopez. Look, I love New York. I love Madison Square Garden. I fought 9 times there throughout my career. It's a home for me. I fought in Las Vegas 4 times. I just wanted to try a different venue, with all due respect.
Oh, bullshit.
You make the same money in Southern California that you would have made in New York because you get a guaranteed minimum. It's not a pay-per-view we're talking about. You get a contract minimum, and you get the same contract minimum in Southern California that you would have got in New York. So that's not the real reason you called this off.
He must be saying this because he thinks it sounds less stupid than calling off the fight because it's on a Friday. He figures this is a better excuse.
I'll still fight Brian Norman this year. Crawford just fought. I'm sure he wants to take some time to be with his family. I still want to stay active. I'm ready. I fought on a fucking Thursday in February against Jermaine Ortiz, for crying out loud. It's just making the right decisions for me now. It's something that I didn't do when I was younger, and I'm doing it now. That's really it. I don't duck anyone. You should know this by now. Don't listen to any of these false narratives. All I'm doing is just dictating and taking care of my career. We put our lives in there, and I am at the point now where I have earned it.
It's the problem with American fighters. They all think they're stars. They all think they've earned it.
Earned what?
What?
You're only holding up your own career. You're only really hurting yourself. Well, I know the people at Top Rank must be at their wits' end, having to deal with this problematic fighter, this prima donna.
To know that as annoying as he is, I actually want him to get the Crawford fight.
He says he wants it. Give him what he wants. The ideal tune-up fight, because that's what Teofimo would be for Terrence. The ideal keep-busy fight for Terrence in between bigger fights. Lopez said earlier this year that he was looking for more activity in 2024, and so far he's gotten it, beating Ortiz in February, then Steve Claggett in June. Before that, he beat former undisputed junior welterweight champion Josh Taylor in June of last year for the WBO title he now holds. But despite the opportunities, Lopez still appears irritated with Top Rank. Earlier this year, Lopez claimed his career-long promoter gave him too many take-it-or-leave-it offers.
He doesn't like anybody he works with. He didn't like Eddie Hearn. He didn't like Matchroom. He still doesn't like Top Rank.
I need a promoter and a network that is going to push me, said Lopez. I'm not saying ESPN is not doing its part. However, it's not what it was before, in the beginning, and that's what I don't approve of. I don't appreciate it.
Well, do remember, you lost to George Kambosos, so it's not going to be like it was in the beginning.
I don't appreciate it. I'm the only star they have left. With everything that I have done for Top Rank and ESPN, I believe it's my time. Just do what I ask.
Everything you've done for them, it's the money they've invested in you that got you here, not the other way around.
All the fighters seem to think they're God's gift to boxing, and all the fighters seem to think that it's the promoters that are indebted to them when it's the other way around. Without the investment they make into your careers and getting them off the ground, getting you known, you don't get any bargaining power.
It's not the chicken and the egg.
That's where it starts, and nobody would even know who you are if it wasn't for Top Rank. You think you're indispensable to Top Rank? Go ahead and don't fight.
Don't fight.
Don't do nothing. Just sit on your couch, tweeting tweets, saying this and that, and see if they care. The show's gonna go on, with or without Teofimo.
It will.
I have conquered the 140-pound division. There is no one at 140. Everybody lost. Nobody wanted to fight us. They went the wrong route, and everybody is out. What more can a guy do? I look forward to making more history. We'll go to 147 and be 3 division world champions at 27. That sounds great. And then from there, we'll go to 154, or we'll jump up to 154, because we can do it.
He didn't conquer 140.
You won one belt from one guy at 140. There are 3 other champions champions there, or there were, and there still are. You didn't beat them, you're not undisputed, you didn't conquer that division.
You're pretending like there aren't 3 other guys holding 3 other belts there right now. You didn't fight them, you didn't beat them.
But if he wants to go to 147 to get his ass kicked by Boots, go ahead. If you want to go to 154 to get your ass kicked by Terrence, you can do that too.
I'll watch.
If he is serious about fighting Terrence, though I don't think he is. Like I said, I think he's trying to distract people from the fact he just avoided Brian Norman by bringing up Terrence. That's what I think he's really doing. Now, upstairs at junior middleweight that I just mentioned, Tszyu versus back rub Murtazaliev done as part of a 3-fight plan for Tim Tszyu.
In my previous video, we talked about the potentiality of Tszyu working with Turki Al-Sheikh beyond the Murtazaliev fight. Here, we'll talk about the potentiality of them not working together.
Tszyu will challenge Bakram Murtazaliev for his IBF junior middleweight world title at a venue in Florida, possibly Orlando, on October 19th.
This is different from what we initially heard. Initially, we heard Tszyu's next fight was going to be in Australia next month.
This article suggests that it's going to be a little further out in October right here in America. That's according to 2 WBN sources with knowledge of the fight agreement. One source added that it's part of a tentative 3-fight plan which could see Tszyu run a gauntlet of top-tier fighters in the wildly competitive junior middleweight division. Tszyu was a must-see attraction even before his bloody war with Sebastian Fundora earlier this year, in an event which kick-started the PBC Champions era on Prime Video. Though the fight was close, an argument could have been made Tszyu had done enough to get the win himself. The fact he left the canvas looking like a crime scene may have gone against him, though, as Fundora scored eye-catching damage. Fundora ultimately won a split decision.
Never should have happened.
I really wonder what George Rose and Tszyu left that night thinking to themselves, that initially you were supposed to fight Keith Thurman, a naturally smaller fighter moving up in weight, who's up there in age, who's an orthodox fighter, and what you ended up with was the opposite. A big guy bigger than you, who's not an orthodox fighter, he's a southpaw as a last-minute replacement.
They didn't find that at all odd?
Regardless, Tszyu's return is a significant one, as the fight with Murtazaliev is a done deal, quote-unquote, per a WBN source. We clarified this with a second source close to Tszyu, and that source said everything was ready for October 19th in Florida. Florida, US of A, not Australia. Murtazaliev won the IBF belt in April with an 11th round knockout win over Jack Colquet in Germany to advance his pro boxing record to 22 wins and 16 KOs.
Are they going to be headlining?
Is this going to be a main event? An Australian and a Russian fighting in the state of Florida. What it reminds me of is when Top Rank had an Australian and a Brit fighting in the state of Oklahoma.
Cambosos versus Hughes.
What kind of crowd are you expecting to draw in Florida with Tszyu versus Murtazaliev as a main event, or worse? Is this not even going to be a main event, and is Tszyu now being relegated to being an undercard fighter, fighting on someone's undercard when in his native Australia, he's a headliner? The October fight would be Murtazaliev's toughest challenge yet, as Tszyu's loss to Fundora in March followed years of wins over Jeff Horn, Terrell Gachet, Tony Harrison, and Brian Mendoza, so he's established himself as a battle-tested player in the division. Though Tszyu enters the World Championship bout off a loss, the IBF mandated the title fight with Murtazaliev earlier in August.
This month.
This potential 3-fight plan that they have laid out for Tszyu, what does this mean for his future and potentially working with Turki Al-Sheikh?
Well, 2 things can be true at the same time.
This 3-fight plan doesn't necessarily close the door on him working with Turkey after the 3-fight plan is over, and remember that the plan is said to be a tentative plan. Emphasis on tentative.
What does that mean?
That it's not a lock, that it's not a certainty. It's time to become a 2-time world champion, Tszyu said, according to his promoter's official website. When it became public knowledge, the IBF were mandating the bout. He even said he's had his eyes on Murtazaliev for years, as they were first linked with one another in 2019, before he headed into the fight with Tony Harrison. It's good that he's got a title, and it's been mandated, said Tszyu earlier this month. He can't be hiding anymore. Tszyu's World Championship fight in October is part of a tentative 3-fight plan. A source close to the fighter with direct knowledge of the situation told WBN. The 3-fight plan begins with Murtazaliev, and if Tszyu is successful and injury-free, he could fight PBC puncher Erickson Lubricant.
This guy again?
As soon as December.
What is with them trying to make a Tszyu versus Lubin fight? Erickson Lubin is a nobody!
Lubin has twice shown that it's not about how hard you hit, and he hits hard, but how hard you get hit and keep moving forward. This is because after his debut loss to Jermel Charlo, Lubin gave a masterclass in how to rebound off a first-round knockout defeat by putting together 6 wins in a row.
Yeah, and then he got his face rearranged by Sebastian Fundora.
He then ran into Fundora and lost a Fight of the Year candidate that WBN attended at a Las Vegas venue in 2022. Since that defeat, he's beaten Luis Arias and Jesus Ramos in back-to-back fights. Should Tszyu beat Murtazaliev and Lubin, then a rematch with Fundora becomes that much bigger, completing the third part of a 3-fight plan for Tszyu, our source finished. The Fundora versus Tszyu fight could take place as soon as the first quarter of next year. The source stressed that plans are subject to change, as is often the case in the sport of boxing.
None of those fights are bigger than the Crawford fight.
The back-rub Murtazaliev fight is negligible because that fight gets Tszyu an alphabet title in a timely fashion.
So it's negligible. But wasting any amount of time on Erickson Lubin to afford him a title shot for what?
Why?
That's not a big money fight.
Certainly not bigger than a Crawford fight. It's not going to pay out to Tszyu what he would get paid out to fight Terence Crawford. The only virtue of fighting Erickson Lubin is that he's not as good as Terence Crawford. He's not as highly touted. He's not pound for pound like Terence Crawford. That's the only pro.
The only upside.
But then again, maybe that's what Team Tszyu are looking for. A winnable fight after the Murtazaliev fight. A winnable fight, a keep busy fight. The source stressed that plans are subject to change, as is often the case in the sport of boxing. WBN was with Tszyu numerous times in the build-up and in the immediate aftermath of his fight with Fundora, and Tszyu said over and over he's a throwback fighter.
The Crawford fight gets you more money, but it's not as winnable as the Lubin fight.
That's the catch-22, that's the caveat. That if he goes in there with Terence Crawford, there is an increased probability that he will lose. Whereas if he keeps busy with Lubin, there's a better chance that he wins.
Makes it to a Fundora rematch?
If Sebastian Fundora is a part of this master plan, this 3-fight plan, it gives me the impression that Sebastian and his team have no intention of facing Terence Crawford.
None.
And neither does Tim Tszyu. Another chapter in the same book where the PBC is hard at work behind the scenes, freezing that fighter out.
They did it at welterweight. They may be trying to do it again at junior middle. The only silver lining is that these plans, they are subject to change.
It's not set in stone. So if Turkey makes Tim Tszyu an offer after the Murtazaliev fight, a sizable offer to ensure that Terence gets the best fights possible with the best available opponents, maybe they scrap this 3-fight plan.
But if they don't, and Tim Tszyu goes through with an Erickson Lubin fight, well, nobody views Lubin in the same lens they view Crawford.
Nobody rates Lubin as highly as they rate Crawford. Fighting Lubin in place of Crawford would leave Tim Tszyu open to criticism. This Bagram fight, this is negligible because this is a world title fight.
You give him a pass for that one.
But not the Lubin fight, because what's in it for you? You don't get as much money fighting Lubin. The only virtue of fighting Lubin is that he's more beatable. It's not going to be for as much money. There won't be as many world titles on the line. No, the only upside of facing Erickson Lubin is that he's a more beatable guy than Terence, and that would be an according to Hoyle duck. Is that what's about to happen? Only time can tell.
And it will.